All right, thanks everybody for being here. It looks like we have a quorum, so we can move forward with the business of the evening. I'll do a quick screen share. Members in attendance, we have Mr. Grismore, Clay, Graham, Rosales, and myself. And we'll do a screen share for approval of the previous minutes. So I make a motion that we approve the current agenda, and it's on screen. Can I have a second?
I second.
Second. Okay, thank you. And I will pull up previous minutes for our review. This was also shared out. But we'll review the minutes from our first meeting. To make sure that they are as follows. Right? Are there any changes or updates that we would like to make to the August minutes? Okay. Hearing no suggested changes, I'm going ahead and make a motion that we approve the August minutes. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. All those who approve, can I get an aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If anyone disapproves, can I get a nay? All right. Tonight is a bit of a business meeting. We'll have an opportunity to review our current continuous improvement plan and the SMART goals. We will have an opportunity to look at our data, so spring 23 milestones results, as well as fall 23 MAP results. And that will actually be the majority of the discussion. That would have been everything that would be contained in my usual report. But we do have one other thing to add to the report. So that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and get into the presentation. Again, topics: reviewing the school continuous improvement plan and priorities, looking at our SMART goals for the 23-24 school year, having an opportunity to look at our spring map and our fall map. Let me update that. Fall map and spring milestone data. Looking at our current enrollment and leveling, and Slater as a partner school will not be doing any leveling, but we'll get into our enrollment. And we'll finish with just an update about the school. So let me close my door. All right, our current continuous improvement plan was developed starting in spring of last year. We'd gotten to the point in the school year with our spring map data where we knew the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats to the school operations here at Slater. The plan was developed with our partners from the Georgia Department of Education. It was developed with local staff and cluster staff. And where we ended up is here. So I'll first review the SMART goals for the 23-24 school year. We have two SMART goals contained in that continuous improvement plan, two related to ELA and two related to math. Both the ELA and math SMART goals have targets for the percentage of students we want to see developing and above in those content areas, as well as the percentage of students we want to see proficient and above in those respective content areas. And the goals are based on historic performance. They're based on prior year performance and just best practices in education. So the first SMART goal is to increase the percentage of students scoring developing and above in ELA from 33.6% to 49.1% by spring 2024 as measured by milestones and or MAP. The second SMART goal is to increase the percentage of students scoring proficient and above in ELA from 10% to 20% by spring 2024 as measured by milestones and/or MAP. Those are the ELA SMART goals. The math SMART goals is to increase the percentage of students scoring developing and above on GMAS and math from 41.9% to 58% by spring 2024. And that last SMART goal is to increase the percentage of students scoring proficient and above on GMAS and math from 8.7% to 17.4% by spring 24. Those of you who were here last year will notice that the ELA goal in terms of developing and above is the same as last year's goal. The school improvement team decided to leave that goal the same. We made progress year over year, but we had not made enough progress toward that goal to warrant moving it. So we left that goal the same. However, we did get granular. We did get a little bit deeper and set proficiency goals so that we can really focus on moving those kids, moving the percentage of kids performing at grade level. We want to double that in both ELA and math. The math goal we did increase because if memory serves, we had a 15-point increase in the percentage of kids developing and above last year from last year to this year. So because of that significant amount of math movement, we felt that we could move that goal from 50% developing and above to 58% for the current year, just to keep us focused on pretty significant continuous improvement. We have two columns here where we will review the APS strategic priorities and initiatives and our school strategic priorities. So this first one for the APS bucket is fostering academic excellence for all. The way we're looking at that, the way we're attacking that as a school is implementing professional learning communities, focusing on small group instruction, and adopting the new math standards that were recently implemented by GoTeam. Building a culture of student support, whole child intervention, and personalized learning. We have our intervention block that's been a part of our work for the past 3 years, and we're refining that, but we are really leaning into monitoring the attendance initiatives. We had pretty significant attendance challenges at Slater last year. I think we ended the year with 50% of students meeting the CCRPI indicator for attendance. That is up from the previous year with only 33% met that CCRPI indicator. So attendance at Slater has been a challenge since the pandemic. And while we've made some progress there, we want to get to 80% of students meeting that CCRPI indicator. So the school strategies that we're using to move the needle on that is the functioning attendance team, and that is facilitated by Dr. Danzler twice a month, as well as individualized student support through the care team. That is also facilitated by Dr. Danzler twice a month. I neglected to mention the school strategies for the fostering of academic excellence for all. Those are the monitoring of collaborative planning, monitoring and providing small group instruction feedback, monitoring school-wide writing PL, and the continuous deconstruction of the new math standards at each grade level. We recently had professional learning this Monday from the folks at Metro RESA, our RESA partners and our Godot partners, to assist us with continuing to deconstruct the new math standards, as well as unpacking all of the different resources that Godot has available for us. One of the resources that I was excited to see was I can't call them exemplar problems. They were practice problems. I can't remember what the state calls them, but they have that item bank of practice problems related to each unit. So I was pretty excited to see that. So we have an example or multiple examples of what mastery looks like. So I was excited to see that. Moving down the columns in the strategic priorities and initiatives, both APS and school. This orange box is equipping and empowering leaders and staff. We have a number of staff-led school initiatives. One is, and I'm going to update the language here from teacher advisory group to principal advisory group. The principal advisory group is a cross-functional group of teachers who I meet with once a month, who give me their eyes and ears input on how things are going with the school. This year's group was intentionally assembled to include folks who serve multiple grade levels, so that their vantage point takes into account the impact of our work across grade levels. So there's representation there from enrichment, from special ed, from student support, and also tier 1 teachers. It includes folks who were quote unquote legacy Slater staff, meaning they were here before I came on board last year, legacy Thomasville staff, new hires, and experienced folks as well. And we also have the teacher wellness committee, who's responsible for just working sure that the culture and climate of the school is one that addresses things like staff wellness and that addresses things like teacher burnout. And this is not included here, but there's always the team leads and other folks who lead in the school in an unofficial capacity, who have access to myself and the other senior administrators, who give us feedback on whether or not what we're doing is working or whether or not it's too much or not enough. So there's multiple opportunities for staff members to lead and give feedback on how things are working at the school. And last but not least, we're creating a system of school supports. Again, those staff-led supports, with us allocating discretionary funding to each grade level and each team this year to just let the school teams know, hey, this is what we need to make things work at the classroom level. This is a change from the way that we have done budgeting in the past. In the past, it's essentially we'll do pretty large purchases in the beginning of the school year in terms of staff supplies and those kinds of things. And we would do a lot of ad hoc responses to teacher needs and grade band needs. But this time, and this is our first year doing this, each team lead has a yearly allotment that comes out of our discretionary budget. They are able to submit requests on behalf of their teams on a monthly basis. Those requests must be linked to one of our school improvement goals. And there needs to be a rationale included with those orders. So that process, at least from my vantage point, feels a lot smoother. Ms. Nunn is doing a good job of keeping up with the orders, but also keeping up with the respective balances in each team's budget to make sure that those discretionary funds go where we need them to go, which is directly to the classroom. So that is the synopsis there of the strategic priorities and initiatives, the school's strategic priorities and initiatives, the specific strategies that we are using to meet those priorities and initiatives. And there's actually more strategies than are listed here. And those strategies come up in our short-term action plans, our 45-day short-term action plans. But for the sake of brevity and the sake of time for this evening, everything is not included there. But the continuous improvement plan, the final draft of which is due to the district on the 30th, will be uploaded and included on the website as well. So anyone who is interested in digging into the nuts and bolts of that will be available on the website for review. Moving on, keeping with the rest of the agenda, we will get into our fall 23 MAP scores, our spring 23 milestone scores, and we'll have an opportunity for some discussion with members of the GoTeam. Some of you may have seen this before, but these are our milestone results for ELA. So we have a couple of columns here, and I'll voice over them all. The left side of our presentation here asks the question whether or not we grew year over year. And on the right side, it asks, have we grown over time? So SY17, which I believe was the first year that Slater was a purpose-built school. SY19 is the pre-pandemic milestones. SY22 is the first year out of the pandemic. SY23 is last year, so the year that the Slater and Thomasville communities were combined. So we'll start with whether or not we grew year over year. So for the developing and above bucket, SY22, again, this is the first year out of the pandemic to last year. We had 6 points in growth for the percentage of students developing and above. So we had positive movement, not as much as we wanted or would have hoped for, but there was some positive movement there. Our spring map data from last year actually had us trending higher than this 33.2%, had us trending at about 41% of students developing and above. The gap between the spring map data and the milestones data can be attributed to writing instruction. The map assessment does not include writing instruction, while the milestones assessment does. So when we are comparing map to milestones, we're not exactly comparing apples to apples. That gap in what is measured can account for the gap in scores between those two assessments. The multiple choice measure is pretty accurate, but again, the absence of the writing measure creates a gap between spring map and spring milestones. Did we grow year over year in terms of being proficient and above? We had about 3 points of growth in the percentage of students that were proficient and above year over year. And growing over time, we saw a slight decline from SY17 to SY19, pretty big drop from pre-pandemic, which is SY19, to post-pandemic. And this is consistent with what we have seen around the district. But, it's a pretty significant drop, again, here at Slater. But we are rebounding and moving back toward pre-pandemic levels of performance. One of the areas that we are focusing on this year is writing across the curriculum. We recently had a visit from the Department of Education, who did a mini audit. And one of the things that they remarked upon was that every classroom they visited for the audit, regardless of content area, they observed students writing in class. So we're starting sooner and being more intentional about the writing across the curriculum to hopefully not have as much of a gap between spring milestones and spring map scores. Proficient and above, SY17, again, this is, I believe, purpose-built's first year, is a 13.9%. SY19 is the pre-pandemic, 13.2% developing and above, almost a 50% drop from 19 to 22. But, we are rebounding in the area of ELA in terms of the number of kids that we are getting proficient and above. And again, the goal here, we rounded this up to 10% of students proficient and above, but the goal here is to double this number from this rounded 10% to 20% by end of year. We have our fall map data. And again, that fall map data, when we're comparing map to milestones, we are not comparing apples to apples because of the absence of writing. So this 40% developing and above really only includes the multiple choice portion, but that actually matches, within, a point or two where we ended the school year last year in terms of spring map. So it is good that we didn't have much of a summer slide. Typically we will see students performing higher in the spring and a little bit lower in the fall because of that summer slide. But we're not having as much of a summer slide as we've had in the past, which is positive. But we are trending positively, again, with that asterisk in the developing and above bucket. We're also trending positively, again, with that asterisk in the proficient and above bucket, knowing that this doesn't include writing. Moving on to math. Math, when we talk about map and milestones, It is more of a direct comparison, apples to apples, because we're looking at the same sort of questions on the math assessment for MAP as we do on milestones. So our MAP predictor for milestones is usually correct within a few points. But answering the question, did we grow year over year in both the developing and above and proficient and above buckets? The answer is yes. So about 15 points of growth in the developing and above bucket for math, and almost 6 points of growth in the proficient and above bucket year over year for math. So it's a pretty significant shift. Have we grown over time? Again, the gap here between SY19 and SY22 is the pandemic and its impact on students and families. So from SY17 to 19, the scores are fairly stable. Pretty significant drop from 19 to 22. And then from 22 to 23, which again was our first year as a combined Slater, we see about a 15-point increase in the percentage of kids developing and above. So positive movement, but not quite back to pre-pandemic levels of performance. Proficient and above, again, some growth here, but it's negligible. We're talking about a point and some change. Pretty steep drop from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic scores in math. And we talked about this all GoTeam and PTO and every other opportunity last year. And, I'll reiterate the point this year is, literacy, while there was a drop, it wasn't as steep, it wasn't as significant. And, I attribute that to literacy continues more readily outside of school sometimes than formal math instruction. So there's books in people's homes. There's language when you ride the car or the bus and you're passing billboards. There's oral language that kids are getting from conversation. There's closed captioning on television and on YouTube and those kinds of places where outside of school, formal mathematics is really not happening. A lot of places are now cashless. Kids are not necessarily running errands to the store with their parents, or if they are, parents may be using cards or other cashless forms of payment. So they're not actively, making change like they used to. So that math drop is significant, but I think there's environmental reasons for why. And Slater is rebounding pretty significantly from that SY22 score to the SY23 score. And again, the goal here is to more or less double that performance from the 8.7% is actually what we have. We have 8.9 here. I'm not sure why, but 8.7% to 17.4%. So those are the goals there. We'll look at the fall MAP results over time as well. Last year's milestone, 41% of kids were developing and above. This fall's MAP, 44%. And again, unlike ELA, the math MAP is much more closely aligned to the math milestones. It's a much better predictor. So this score here is likely accurate in terms of a predictor. But our goal, we're still a ways away from the goal, is to get to 58% developing and above. This is where we ended in spring milestones, the 9% proficient and above. Fall MAP has us at about 8%, so that is statistically the same. That 1 point difference is almost negligible, but we're looking to double or just about double this number to go from 8% to 17%. Other data from the CCRPI lens is just how the school performed on content mastery. The CCRPI scores have not been published publicly yet, but the calculations are available publicly to anyone. So we've done the calculations to show our growth from the 21-22 school year to last year, the 22-23 school year. So we have pretty significant growth year over year, even though we have a ways to go in achievement. We had some fair movement as a school. Growth in every measured content area, pretty significant growth in science. Science was not, we didn't do a deep dive here with science because the Title I school improvement plans are really focusing on math, ELA, and student supports. But the science data was fairly impressive as well, demonstrating that the instructional team here is responding to student needs, and we are having the kind of growth that we should be having. And we also have the closing gaps data, again, from CCRPI. What the state gives is a target for each content area and subgroup, with the expectation that we meet certain growth targets year over year. The growth targets that are expected from the state are 3% for each content area and subgroup. We exceeded that in every single category except for math, students with disabilities in math. One response that we have put in place because of this yellow bucket here, and the yellow indicates that we grew. We just didn't meet that 3% growth that was the state's target. The blue indicates that we exceeded the 3% growth. We actually exceeded the 6% growth target that is set by the state. But the school's response to less than expected performance here was to employ special education co-teachers at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade levels. Last year, we were sharing co-teachers across multiple grade levels. This year, we were able to hire co-teachers to support each of those grade levels individually. We did make a slight shift with that personnel decision. We discovered that some of the co-teachers were more suited to support ELA and others were more suited to support math. So rather than attach a single co-teacher to a single grade level at the 3rd and 4th grade levels, we attached co-teachers to content areas. So there's one co-teacher split across 3rd and 4th, supporting ELA, another split across 3rd and 4th, supporting math, but their schedules allow them to meet those students where they are during the school day. The long and the short of it is we were able to use our budget and our human resources to respond to this gap in the data to make sure that our students with disabilities are performing at the same rate as their peers without disabilities in every content area and subject. A bright spot, though, there is the students with disabilities did exceed the 6% growth target in ELA, much like the rest of their peers in each of the other subgroups, the economically disadvantaged students, the Black students, and the all students group. So all in all, the school is headed in the right direction academically. We are showing, pretty significant growth in every measured content area and grade level. The fall map data shows that we are starting essentially where we finished last year. We did not have the summer slide. We did not have the summer slide. And our non-tested grades are making progress toward reading on grade level. So some of the things that we're doing to ensure that the K-5 students are reading on grade level is obviously we have our tier 1 curriculum, but we also have Kendor, which is a phonics curriculum that we have extended out of the lower primary grades up through grade 5. The map data last year indicated we have a pretty sizable percentage of students who are not reading on grade level. So we extended that that those teaching to read strategies up through fifth grade. And we're also engaging in science of reading cohorts to ensure that the staff has the professional learning they need to stay on top of the research and to make sure that we all know how to teach reading using the most current research around the science of reading. Math fluency and foundational skills continue to be a challenge. But again, we have our intervention block, which allows us to meet students where they are off grade level with those off grade level skills. So if they're in third grade where they should be learning to multiply, but we're still struggling with addition and subtraction, regrouping, place value, those kinds of things, we have time in our schedule that allows us to meet students where they are. But that continues to just be a moving target and a moving challenge as students come to the school with needs that are kind of all over the place. But I believe that we're on target to accomplish our priorities. Our academic goals, I think we need to look at them like a marathon and not a sprint. Because we're slowly moving kids through the different achievement levels. And as new challenges come up, we have to do some troubleshooting to figure out how to best meet the needs of individual students and families. So I will stop talking at this time and I'll go on mute and give the team an opportunity to respond to these questions, what you notice, what you wonder, or what additional questions you may have. You can also put those in the chat. And if you don't have any additional wonderings or additional questions, that's fine as well, because much of this data, except for MAP, we've been discussing for a while, and we've been rooted in this data for a while. So I'll go on mute for a few to give others an opportunity to speak. All right. Seeing and hearing no comments, I'm just going to push through the rest of the agenda. The timeline for GoTeams, we are here. So we're using our data and have an opportunity to update the school's strategic priorities and plan. Hearing no objections or changes or feedback, the final version will go in front of APS. I see something in the chat. Okay.
That was me, Mr. Miles. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Miles, once you finish with that piece and go through, can we go back to the top and do the agenda over for the record? Now that we have Mr. Frazier, who's our parent, we want to get that vote in, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay. All right. Okay, timeline for GoTeams. So hearing no objections or changes, the final version of that plan will go to APS, and we will work that plan this year. Now, Slater being a purpose-built school, we function slightly differently when it comes to budgeting. So GoTeam's supposed to have input on our Title I budgeting. Purpose-built and Slater, we use 100% of our Title I funding for salaries to offset the cost of salaries. Our model from the beginning has always been to try to get the lowest student to adult ratio possible, as well as having the additional intervention supports with both the Lit Lab and Math Lab. And that is where 100% of our Title I funding goes. So we're not going to have much conversation about aligning the Title I budget to our strategic priorities. All of our strategic priorities are fully funded by Purpose Built, through Purpose Built. So our curriculum, our staffing, our additional supplies and those kinds of things are fully funded. So we will probably do meeting 5 a little bit differently than the other GoTeams do, simply because our budgeting is managed fairly differently than a traditional neighborhood school. I wanted to make that point here so that when we kind of go off script for the next go round, we're all on the same page. But before I go to my final updates, I'll stop here and pause and see, are there any questions about anything that has been shared so far?
Hey, in your goal setting, when we had set the goals for this coming year, writing was going to be one of those focuses.
Yeah.
Are we doing any like mock assessments to kind of give these kids a little dry run?
Yes. So the deep dive school improvement plan, that's like 30 some odd pages long, has the specific work that we're doing around writing and the assessment that we're going to be doing there. So we are leveraging a program called RightScore. We used it at Thomasville a few years ago, and I think there are some other APS schools that are now on board with RightScore. But what it will allow us to do is, the writing instruction will happen during the ELA classes. We'll do the RightScore assessment. The assessments will mirror as much as possible the Georgia Milestones assessments. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Nunn, the RightScore team is scoring the assessments, yes?
Yes, and the
Okay.
feedback is just a little bit deeper than you would get on Georgia Milestones. So teachers will be able to do a little bit of deeper dive with their support in the writing.
Thank you. And I wanted to make that point, or just get some clarification on that, because scoring the writing can be time consuming. If you have a class of 21 and we're asking for, essays or responses to a particular thing on top of everything else the teachers have to do, it can be a little bit time consuming. And, how I score may be slightly different than how you score, maybe slightly different than how my neighbor scores, and maybe slightly different than how the state scores milestones. So the sending off allows us to save time on the scoring, but it also allows there to be some uniformity and consistency, fingers crossed on that, because the people scoring it are human as well. But uniformity and consistency in the scoring, and then we just get to respond to the feedback. So that's coming. But for the staff members on the call, like, we wanted to start Q1. There's just too many things going on right now to have that be, a Q1 focus as well. So there's other things in the school improvement plan that we are having to take off the table because there's so much to juggle, right? Like, we're responding to so many different things. Thank you, Nun. We're responding to so many different things, and we want to get off the list, right? So there's some urgency around that, and an unintended consequence of that urgency is people are overwhelmed. Students may be overwhelmed, but staff is definitely overwhelmed with the amount of asks. So we're wrapping up Q1. Q2, we should see a reduction in some of the asks. And we just need to be a little more thoughtful about how we roll some of these things out so that it's manageable. But that's a long way to say, yes, Mr. Grismore, we are doing mock writing assessments. They are coming, and it's already been paid for. It's in the budget.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? All right. The principal's report is usually me going over the data. So this whole meeting was effectively the principal's report. But I will share a couple of other items. Our current enrollment. So our projected enrollment this year was 487 without pre-K. And we pulled pre-K out because they come from a different funding source. We have Georgia Pre-K here at Slater. So half of our pre-K team is funded through Georgia Pre-K, and the other half is funded through private fundraising. But in terms of just general funds, we're looking at K-5. So we were projected to have 487 in K through 5 without pre-K. We're actually at 491 without pre-K, 533 with pre-K. So we have 4 more students in the building than we budgeted for as of today. What we do know is between now and end of year, enrollment fluctuates pretty significantly, and it fluctuates up more than down as we have individual students and families move in. I mean, we've been enrolling folks as recently as last week, this week, getting new students. And the cluster team is doing a lot of community outreach in our attendance zone to fill up the pre-K classrooms. I think right now we're at 47 maybe across the 3 pre-K classrooms. 40 something, I'm sorry, 42 across the 3 pre-K classrooms. And we're budgeted for 63, I believe. So the team is basically just going door to door, letting families know that we still have space in the pre-K programs. But again, Slater being a purpose-built school and being the only elementary school in the purpose-built pipeline, we don't do leveling like APS does, where in APS, leveling might mean 2 teachers and a para from school A need to go to school B because of enrollment differences. If we do leveling internally, where we may shift a teacher from one grade level to the next. And we had to do that last year with kindergarten and first grade. But right now, it doesn't look like we're going to be doing any of that sort of leveling this school year. Questions there? Okay. And the last piece of news, excuse me, for the GoTeam is we have been recognized as one of only 155 elementary schools in the state as a literacy leader. So we'll have the state superintendent from the Georgia Department of Education here at Slater on October 4th for an award. The school is receiving the award, but I believe the grade level team that is being recognized as last year's 3rd grade team for 15.7% growth year over year. Congrats. Year over year. And the number of elementary schools in the state fluctuates from year to year, but in general, you can count on about there being 1,200 elementary schools in the state of Georgia. So being one of 155 means we are among the top 10 or 12% of schools in the state to receive this award. We're receiving it for growth. There's maybe 8 other schools in APS who are being recognized, and we are hosting them all here on the 4th from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So it is a pretty big deal for us to have the challenges, or for Slater to have had the challenges that it had coming out of the pandemic, to now being recognized as one of the top schools in the state for literacy. So kudos to everyone who touched those students and who did that work. Big shout out to Ms. Rosales representing her 3rd grade team. But yeah, it was a lot of hard work, and yeah, we thank you for that work. And that brings me to the end of this evening's presentation. But I am going to go back to the agenda to make sure that we officially adopt it for the record. So I'm going to make a motion to resubmit the agenda for the record. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right. All of those who approve of this evening's agenda, can I have an aye or a yes?
Aye.
Yes.
Anyone who disapproves, can I have a nay or a no? All right, y'all. As always, thank you for your time this evening. The next meeting will be a little bit different. It will not follow the APS structure because, again, our budgeting is different. What I can do to make sure that we align to it as much as possible is I'll get with our finance department to pull the Title I allotment so we can show where the money goes. I need to be a little bit thoughtful about that because it's tied directly to personnel. We'll get into people's individual salaries, and that's a little weird. That's a little uncomfortable. But we'll figure out a way to make sure that we have some transparency into where the money is going without putting people's individual salaries out there for public consumption. All right. All right. I move that we adjourn this meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good night.